In human history, fear has been a powerful weapon, able to shape entire societies. What drives a man to turn that fear into his deadliest tool, to twist it until collective anxiety becomes personal power? In post-war America, the fear of communism became a national obsession. Joseph McCarthy emerged in this climate, not just as a communist hunter, but as the architect of a paranoia that cut across all levels of society. McCarthy didn't just go after real enemies. Often the shadows he fought were born from his own mind and the collective fears of a divided nation. He gave a face and a name to national anxiety, turning invisible threats into clear targets. Newspaper headlines and fiery speeches made the feeling of coming danger even stronger. So, McCarthy became one of the most controversial and powerful figures in American history, able to destroy careers and reputations with just one accusation. His name became linked to a dark time, the era when suspicion was enough to ruin a life. Fear became a system, and doubt became a judgment. McCarthy's rise was very fast. His methods were without mercy. After him, he left a trail of broken careers and families marked by suspicion. To understand the McCarthy era, we must first try to understand the man behind the stories. Underneath his public image, there's a complex mix of ambition, insecurity, and bitterness. The story of Joseph McCarthy is more than just a political biography. It's a look into the mind about the power of fear and how easily truth can be lost in times of trouble. The world was split into opposing sides. The threat of nuclear destruction was real, and the fear of communist spies was felt everywhere in American society. McCarthy didn't invent that fear, but he got very good at using it. He knew how to make collective anxiety stronger and turn it into a way to control people. Throughout this documentary, we will break down his story to show the complex workings of a mind that built an empire out of fear, and we will understand how his impact still affects politics today. Joseph McCarthy was a United States Senator from Wisconsin, whose name became linked with one of the most troubled times in American political history. Elected in 1946, McCarthy quickly became well known across the country during the early years of the Cold War, a time when fears of communist spies taking over gripped the nation. Old footage shows McCarthy with a serious face, speaking to packed Senate chambers. Newspaper headlines appear on screen. McCarthy claims 205 communists in State Department, Red Scare invades nation, Senator demands loyalty oaths. His accusations were wide-ranging, often without solid proof, but they captured the minds and worries of a nation on edge. McCarthy led the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, using televised hearings to question government officials, military officers, and everyday citizens about their supposed ties to communism. His relentless hunt for supposed communists led to widespread fear, ruined reputations, and the blacklisting of countless people in government, the arts, and the media. Scenes from the Senate: McCarthy, finger-pointing, questioning witnesses under bright lights. The camera moves across stacks of papers and anxious faces in the audience. His tactics: public accusations, demands for loyalty oaths, and using guilt by association, came to define what would later be called McCarthyism, a campaign of suspicion and intimidation that left a lasting mark on American democracy. In the early 1950s, McCarthy was one of the most powerful and controversial figures in America. His actions forced the country to face the delicate balance between national security and individual freedoms. Before we dive into the roots of his ambition and the forces that shaped him, it's important to understand the impact of his campaign, a campaign that changed the nation's political landscape and set the stage for an era defined by fear and suspicion. To understand the man who would later hold the nation in his grip, we must first travel to the windy farmlands of rural Wisconsin. There, among endless fields and open skies, life was tough and winter was relentless. Work began before dawn, and family was both a refuge and the law. Joseph Raymond McCarthy was born in 1908 in Grand Chute, the fifth of 7 children in an Irish Catholic family. His mother, Bridget, was devout and strict. His father, Timothy, a man of few words and hands rough from work. The Catholic faith set the rhythm of family life, with prayers, Sunday Mass, and the hope of a better future. Joe's childhood was marked by hardship. He shared a bed with his siblings and quickly learned that hard work was the only currency accepted. A family anecdote tells that, at just 8 years old, he would get up in the dark to milk cows before going to school, his boots still wet with frost. This upbringing forged in him a relentless work ethic, but also a deep sense of not belonging. Joe was a small-town boy, always aware of his humble beginnings and how others saw him. Religion offered him comfort, but it also reinforced the idea that he had to prove his worth to the world. School didn't interest him at first. He dropped out at 14 to start his own chicken business. It failed, but that setback taught him about risk and loss. His mother comforted him with words of hope, reminding him that faith and perseverance were more valuable than immediate success. That early failure was a turning point. Joe learned that the world owed him nothing and that only determination could open doors for him. The desire to improve himself became a quiet obsession, fueled by constant comparison with his siblings and the pressure not to let his family down. At 20, in an act of sheer will, McCarthy decided to go back to school. He aimed to make up for lost time, and in just 1 year completed a 4-year high school curriculum. His toughness surprised teachers and neighbors alike. This feat was a testament to his intelligence and his almost desperate need to catch up. Behind every achievement, a deep insecurity lingered, the feeling of always being the outsider, the one who had to work twice as hard to be accepted. After graduating from high school, he enrolled at Marquette University to study law. He paid for college by working every job he could, washing dishes, at a gas station, unloading trucks. Every dollar earned was a personal victory. This experience further sharpened his sense of being a self-made man, someone who had to fight for everything he had. The underdog mentality became the core of his identity, a tool he would later use to connect with ordinary Americans who also felt ignored by the elite. Deep down, McCarthy's story is that of a boy who never stopped fighting the feeling of being left out. His ambition was, in part, a response to not belonging, the need to be seen, to be respected, to prove that the farm boy could go further than anyone. Thus, rural life, faith, family, and constant struggle shaped Joseph McCarthy's character. A character hardened by hardship, but also marked by the eternal search for acceptance and power. This is the psychological root of his story. The Wisconsin farm boy, who, driven by a sense of not belonging and ambition, would become one of the most controversial figures in American history. After graduating from law school in the middle of the Great Depression, McCarthy found himself in a country filled with uncertainty and tough competition. His ambition quickly led him to politics, where his first campaign for district attorney ended in defeat. But this setback taught him how important public visibility was and how much a personal story matters. In 1939, in a society looking for strong leaders, McCarthy managed to get elected as a circuit judge, the youngest in Wisconsin's history. A local newspaper wrote, "His energy and determination set him apart from others." This achievement cemented his reputation as a man of action, ready to challenge the usual way of doing things. His time as a judge was controversial. Critics accused him of caring more about promoting himself than about justice. A colleague would remember years later, "Joe always knew how to get the press's attention." McCarthy used the media to build an image of being efficient, even if it often meant his decisions weren't very deep. When the United States entered World War II, McCarthy saw a chance to change his image. He joined the Marines, presenting himself as a great patriot. Later accounts say he exaggerated his military achievements, setting up his future personal legend. McCarthy called himself the tail gunner, even though his official records show he had an administrative role. A journalist at the time wrote, "His greatest talent was turning small achievements into big feats." This way of changing public perception would be key to his rise. Building an image as a war hero was a planned move. In post-war America, a military background opened doors. McCarthy understood that how people saw him was just as powerful as the truth, and he carefully built his legend. After the war, McCarthy aimed his ambition at the Senate. The political situation was one of distrust and division. He used the fear of communism and the tiredness from the war to present himself as the protector of American values. In 1946, he launched a strong campaign using negative tactics and personal attacks. A political analyst would say, McCarthy understood that in modern politics, looking strong is more important than being truthful. His direct and aggressive style started a new era in election campaigns. His opponent, La Follette, was surprised by how fierce the attacks were. McCarthy won the Republican primary, and with it, his ticket to Washington. His rise was seen as the victory of the outsider over the established politicians. Once in the Senate, McCarthy went unnoticed at first. He was a junior senator with no real power, known more for his connections with lobbyists and his nickname, the Pepsi-Cola Kid, than for his work on laws. His career seemed stuck. The press started to openly criticize him. One headline read, "Does McCarthy have a future in Washington?" His popularity was dropping, and getting re-elected seemed far off. In this situation, McCarthy desperately looked for a cause that would save him from being forgotten in politics. Facing a tough re-election, McCarthy realized he needed a clear enemy to get the public excited. This is how the strategy that would make him famous was born: identify, accuse, and divide. His rise was a mix of personal ambition and a country eager to find people to blame. On the night of February 9, 1950, in a dimly lit room in Wheeling, West Virginia, the air was thick with anticipation. McCarthy, with a steady voice, addressed an audience unaware they were about to witness the start of a national storm. With a paper in hand, McCarthy declared he had a list of communists who had snuck into the State Department. Faces in the room tightened. The news spread like wildfire, fueled by shocking headlines and the sound of the radio. The number of names on the list changed with each telling: 205 in Wheeling, 57 days later. But the exact number didn't matter. What mattered was the fear unleashed on society, where anyone could be the next target. The accusation was a crushing blow. The whole country was frozen by suspicion. Families, friends, and co-workers started looking at each other with doubt, while the media made the widespread fear even worse. The truth was simpler and sadder. No such list existed. The paper McCarthy waved was probably just an old letter. But the damage was already done. The doubt was a seed impossible to remove. This is how the witch hunt began. McCarthy had perfected how to use fear. A bold accusation, repeated with strong belief, could ruin lives. Faces of the accused filled newspapers. Anxious crowds demanded answers. Group psychology became his friend, and the entire country was swept up in a wave of suspicion and silence. A special subcommittee was set up to look into McCarthy's claims. But instead of being exposed, McCarthy turned the hearings into a stage where he showed off his skill at manipulating, avoiding, and throwing accusations back. Experts in political psychology say that his talent for public confrontation was a sign of a personality obsessed with control and needing approval. One of his favorite targets was Owen Lattimore, whom he accused of spying without solid proof. Even though Lattimore was cleared, his good name was ruined forever. This way of ruining people's lives shows a self-centered trait. Not being able to feel for others' pain, using people like pawns in his personal fight. Public disapproval didn't stop McCarthy. Instead, his win over Tidings made him bolder and put fear into his colleagues. Experts compare his method to that of other strong leaders, creating enemies, making people take sides, and gaining power through shared fear. His influence spread like a shadow over American life, from politics to Hollywood. The scary atmosphere he perfected led to blacklists and silenced those who spoke out. Experts warn that this problem isn't just from one time period. Fear is still a powerful weapon in the hands of charming leaders. Hundreds of talented people saw their careers and lives ruined. The fear wasn't just about being a communist, but about being singled out. The human cost was terrible, and many never got better. McCarthy's story is also the story of the people he hurt. To understand why he did what he did, we need to look at his personal story. In the early 1950s, McCarthy was facing political failure and deep self-doubt. He needed something to make him important again. Like other insecure leaders, he found a way to rebuild his identity and power by creating a common enemy. Anti-communism was the perfect enemy, unseen, everywhere and feared. It let him build a story where he was the country's savior. This method, according to psychologists, is common for self-centered people who need to feel like they are very important. McCarthy was a master at the big lie. A bold accusation, repeated with strong belief, becomes true for many. This trick has been used by other popular leaders throughout history, from Goebbels to today's figures, showing how powerful emotional manipulation can be. He acted based on the idea of guilt by accusation. Just being named by him was enough to be marked. The process itself was the punishment, and fairness was put aside. This psychological way of excluding and pointing fingers has been studied by experts as a form of social control. Underneath his opportunism was a deep self-centeredness, an endless need for praise and power. Psychologists describe him as a classic example of unhealthy self-love, where how one looks to others is more important than truth or morals. A key sign of self-centeredness is not caring about others' feelings. McCarthy saw his targets as props in his political play, unable to see them as real people. This way of treating people as less than human is common in strong leaders and has terrible results. Strangely, his pride came from a deep feeling of not being good enough. His feeling of being less important as a poor farm boy fueled his anger towards the rich and powerful. This mix of pride and weakness is common in self-centered people and explains why they need to control and put down others. It's also possible that he was trapped by his own paranoid thinking, seeing plots and dangers where there were none. This way of thinking fueled his crusade and made him even more out of touch with reality. McCarthy was a master at playing with people's feelings. He used fear, anger and love for country to control the public and crush his enemies. His story is a warning about the harmful power of self-centered leaders and how easily truth can be lost when people are scared. By 1953, Joseph McCarthy was at the top of his power. Drunk on his influence, he made a big mistake. He challenged the US Army. What started as a personal fight soon turned into a national conflict, where his pride and going too far marked the start of his downfall. In the spring of 1954, the Army-McCarthy hearings were shown live across the country. For the first time, millions of Americans could see McCarthy's actions for themselves. How aggressive he was, how he tried to scare people, and how he didn't care about the truth. TV, that new public eye, became the quiet judge that showed his true self. The turning point came when McCarthy, being mean, attacked a young Army lawyer. Joseph Welch, the main lawyer, faced him with a question that hit home for the whole country. At that moment, the TV audience saw how weak power built on fear and tricks really was. "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?" With those words, the spell was broken. TV didn't show a hero, but a bully. The public, who were scared before, started to see McCarthy as a normal man, weak against the truth. The results were quick. McCarthy's approval numbers fell fast. The Senate, showing the change in the country's mood, publicly criticized him that same year. His time of fear was ending, and American society breathed a sigh of relief, even though they were still marked by the scars of fear. After being criticized, McCarthy faded away from politics. His last years showed his decline, alone, ruined by drinking and anger, unable to get back the power he lost. The person who once ruled the national stage ended up as a living warning about the dangers of going too far and not being accepting. But the end of the man was not the end of what he left behind. His name turned into a word, McCarthyism, a word that means using public accusations, spreading bad rumors, and fear to stop people from speaking up. The echo of his method stays in politics and in our shared memory, as a warning about how delicate democracy can be. McCarthy's legacy is a tough lesson. Democracy can be hurt from the inside when fear takes the place of discussion and doubt replaces fairness. Remembering his story is a way to protect truth and freedom, so that the past doesn't happen again in the minds of future generations. Joseph McCarthy's story is more than just a political warning. It's a timeless reminder that the biggest threats to a free society often come from within, wrapped in patriotic words. As Montesquieu warned, the tyranny of a prince in an oligarchy is not as dangerous to the public good as the apathy of a citizen in a democracy. Fear, when used as a tool for power, can twist our most basic values. History teaches us that fear can spread quickly and cause a lot of harm. Hannah Arendt wrote that the greatest enemy of truth is not a deliberate lie, but the shared belief that truth no longer matters. In tough times, it's our job as citizens to ask questions, fight against being controlled, and stand up for the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Democracy isn't a fixed state. It's something we work on every day. As Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is constant watchfulness. The way to fight fear isn't with more fear, but with the courage to think clearly and a strong commitment to truth and fairness. McCarthy's story echoes in every time when fear threatens to silence good sense. The past makes us think, how do we respond to unfairness and manipulation? Democracy relies on brave citizens, ready to stand up for what's right, even when most people stay quiet. McCarthy's legacy is both a warning and an invitation to not give in to fear, to protect freedom, and to remember that democracy lives or dies in the heart of every citizen.